Welcome to the Sanity Project podcast, the place for internet technology professionals whose work-life balance plan has imploded. We are here to provide solutions that will help the IT pro live a sane, healthy, and prosperous life. Here's your host, Joanne Victoria.
Hi, I'm Joanne Victoria, the I Know What Works coach, and I'm the author of 7 books, including Lighting Your Path, How to Create the Life You Want. As a part of creating the life you want, I am the host of the Sanity Project podcast, and I partner with IT pros in telecommunications, technology, entertainment, and mass media. Most of these people's work-life integration plan has imploded, and I want them to have more success, more confidence, more fun, and more inner peace. I interview experts in all areas, and our expert today is in human relations. And let me introduce to you Dr. Cletus Bulach, who is a retired Ohio school superintendent and associate professor emeritus at the University of West Georgia. He is the author of numerous articles in educational journals and is co-author of 2 books. The first one is School Climate and Culture Vis-à-vis Student Learning, Keys to Collaborative Problem Solving and Responsibility. The second book is Enhancing a High-Performing School Culture and Climate, New Insights for Improving Schools. This second book focuses on human relations problems that interfere with creating a positive school culture and climate, poor interpersonal communications, and an inability to cope with conflict, which is what Dr. Bulach is going to speak about today. Individuals' human relations, which is we're always learning something new, and we're going to learn something new today from Dr. Cletus Bulach. Welcome, Dr. Bulach. How are you today?
Pleasure being on your show. Great introduction.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. So we're going to go into how you can improve a person's human relations. How can you do that today?
Well, you got to ask the question, why do people behave the way they do?
Okay. Why do people behave the way they do?
That question has been asked by philosophers going back for centuries. And the earliest philosopher back in the early 1800s said people behave the way they do because they want to live. So if you think of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, at the bottom of his list, there is safety, stress, anxiety, and life itself. So when there's too much stress on a person, too much anxiety, and maybe even fearing for life, as many kids do in schools today because they're bullied, that need is not being met. So the next philosopher came along and he said, oh yeah, you're right, that is a basic need, and that does cause people to behave the way they do, but there is another need that causes them to behave the way they do, and it's happiness. He said, everybody wants moments of happiness in their life. If they have a life with no happiness, then it's not a life. Does that make sense so far?
So far, so good. And since we're talking about either IT professionals in all categories of industries, they too get bullied.
Yes.
It's very clear that there's bullying on the job. It's reframed to use different words that are acceptable in the corporate world and all that jazz, but they get bullied all the time.
Bullying in the workplace does occur. It occurred with me when I was a professor.
Oh, it occurs. I think it occurs with it occurs. That's why I don't work for anybody else anymore, because it occurs. Well, it's the only way to get away from that kind of oppression.
Well, Nietzsche came along late 19th century, and any of your listeners can go in and look up Nietzsche, Niete.
I think it's Scheche.
Che, I believe is how you spell
something
it.
like that, right? I'll get the spelling right in the quotes.
He said, yeah, you're right. People behave the way they do because they want to live, they want to have reduced stress and anxiety, and they want moments of happiness. But he said there's another need that is more important. He said it's power.
Oh.
People want to have power. Now, of course, I equate that with control. Power gives you control. 2 of the most famous books that have been written about power and ultimate power corrupts are Moby Dick and The Heart of Darkness, Albert Camus. Uh, so control is a basic need. And just ask yourself, if you were in complete control versus having no control, what would be the difference in your psyche?
Huh. Well, I wouldn't have to work so hard. I would probably more.
And if you think about that with what's happening on the world stage today,
Good
think
God.
about President Trump and his control needs with the media, with Congress, with the public, with Twitter. He has a high need to control, and he uses Twitter to gain control. So now, if you contrast that with Obama, we talk about conflict management styles, and we can move there. But Obama, on the other hand, with Congress, had no control. So he used his edict, the pen, to write executive orders. So he took control away from Congress. Trump's trying to work with Congress. So he is trying to give them control. He is asking them, look, guys, this DACA thing, we've got to get it fixed. It's up to you to come up with a plan. So he's given control back to them. So control. And then go ahead.
I was saying, if someone is in control and knows they have control, they're able to give away the power, a source of power, a significant part of the power, to the people who rightfully should be doing their jobs.
You're right. The secret of being a good leader is to give control to others without giving it up. Now, how do you do that? How do you give control to people without giving it up? And I've got a couple of techniques I can share with you on that at the end, if you like, how to give control to people who are, working for you. Or if you're a parent, how do you give control to your kids without giving it up? So you have to give control to people because it is a basic need. Now, many kids go to school believing they have no control. They are told that they have to go. They don't want to go. It's the law. They're told what the rules are. They're told what to study. They must sit in their seat. They must behave, and they must do what they're supposed to do. Schools have been described as the most undemocratic institutions in our society other than our prisons. I've got a number of citations of researchers who agree with that statement. So control is the third need, and it's one thing that many kids do not have. And in my 2 books, I share techniques on how to give control without giving it up. You want to hear one of those techniques?
I'd like to, because I think the control issue relates to employees, and certainly IT employees as well, because they may not be in school, but it is sort of like a prison in the regards that if they do something wrong, quote unquote wrong, I don't like that word, but if they do something inappropriate or wrong, they are punished, and either they are demoted or they don't get a raise, and their only option, rather than approaching someone who is not able to communicate effectively, is to leave. And you can't keep leaving all the time. You can't keep trying to find another job. And a kid in school can't keep trying different schools.
You're right. Here's my favorite technique. I call it the expectations diagnosis, and that's in chapter 2 of book number 1. When I was a teacher, I went to the students and I said, what do you guys expect of me as your teacher? Because when I looked out there, I had brown faces, I had white faces, I had yellow faces, I had red faces from all walks of life, kids from different cultures. And I wanted to know what they expected of me as their teacher. Mm-hmm. I wanted to get at the underlying culture in my classroom. What did they value and believe I should do as their teacher? So I gave them 3 3x5 cards, and they said, you want us to tell you what we expect of you? I said, yeah, I want to know what you expect. So they got their 3 3x5 cards, and they wrote one thing on each card. And when I got them, at that time I had about 75 students when I was at Western Hills High School in Cincinnati, Ohio. And I sorted them into common piles. It took me about an hour to sort all those cards, roughly 200. And I paraphrased what was in each pile. And I went back to them and I said, this is what you expect of me as your teacher. I shared it with them. And I says, I'm going to do my best to meet your expectations. So I wanted a relationship with my students. I wanted them to know that I was there to help them. I wanted them to know that I cared about them. I wanted them to know that I was listening to them. I wanted them to know I was open to their thoughts. And so the relationship began. But what I did was I gave them control with the cards. I didn't give it up. Now, the second thing I did was I gave them the same 3x5 cards, and I said, what rules do you want in this classroom? 3x5 cards, 3 of them. They says, you want us to tell you what the rules are? I says, yeah. I want to know what you think the rules ought to be in this classroom. So I did the same thing. I got the 10 rules that had the most in a pile, put them up on the board, and there was one rule that they rarely put in that I just put in. Mm-hmm. It was turn your homework in on time. They very seldom put that one in there. And I put it in, of course, they didn't know.
Well, also, when you say that, that's interesting because that aligns with workers who are given a priority. For example, they're given a project and they have a deadline. You know, it's the same thing. Turn homework in on time is a deadline. So they're given a deadline to complete A, B, C, X, Y, Z, and they don't do it. No different. You know, I think everything is high school, by the way. So I think we still all function as if we were in high school because we haven't learned. Not myself, of course, I'm better than that. But most people just function as if they are still in high school, looking for some boundaries, some guidelines. And I think the guideline that you said about rule, whatever, turning homework in on time is aligned with people getting assignments on the job and they don't follow through with them and they crash.
You're right. So when the rules go up, all the students in the classroom look at the rules and they say, oh my God, there's my rule. I wrote that one. I wrote that one. And all across the room, all the kids say, there's my rule. That's my rule. And the reason I did this is to establish a relationship with my students. I wanted them to know I cared about them. That's life's fourth basic need, caring. If you were to wake up one morning and realize that nobody cared about you, how would you feel?
Pretty bad.
Yeah. And many kids go to school believing the teacher doesn't care. So what I'm trying to do here with these two techniques, I call them invitations. I give them control. What do you expect of me? What rules do you want? I'm your servant leader, as opposed to self-serving. Most teachers come across as self-serving because they are there to teach and the kids are there to learn. And if they want to learn, that's fine. And if they don't, that's their problem. So many teachers come across as self-serving. But when you come across as a servant leader, that you are there to serve their needs, that changes the whole relationship within that classroom.
Absolutely.
Because it says, I care about you guys. I'm listening to you. I trust you. We are in this together. So when a rule is broken, now, whose rule are they breaking?
Their own.
Their own. So I'm working for them.
Right.
And that changes the power relationship in that classroom tremendously because they know it's we. Not I and you. It's we. We are in this together. We are going to do this together. And I'm here to work for you. Okay. So the fifth basic need is purpose. Mehmet Oz, Rick Warren, Dalai Lama, all say life with no purpose is no life. Well, many kids go to school with no purpose. They have to go. 50% of the kids go to school with no purpose. They have to go. The other 50 are motivated. They want to be engineers. They want to be lawyers. They want good grades. They want to get into after school, after higher ed. So they have purpose. But the 50% who have no purpose, they have no purpose, believe the teacher doesn't care about them, believe the other kids doesn't care about them. They have no control. They're not happy. and they may be experiencing some form of stress or anxiety in their lives.
Mm-hmm.
How is that kid going to learn? There's no motivation there. So the 2 books I've written describe how to get these 5 basic needs met. And I just shared 2 techniques with you. Here, of course, teachers have the same problem. They have the same 5 basic needs. And my favorite human relations technique is what I call the PMI, the positive, minus, and interesting. Normally, when I started a meeting or a seminar or whatever with the teachers, I would say, hey guys, form groups of 5, and I want you to share with each member of your group something you did in the last month that was positive, that was a negative, and that was interesting. Positive, minus, and interesting. I said, and I'm going to go first. I'll share with you in the last month what was positive, minus, and interesting about me. And I share that. And then I say, okay, anybody need further instructions? Go. When your group is finished sharing, look at me. And then I'll ask each group to report out the most significant positive, minus, and interesting thing that was shared in your group. So each group at that point gets busy sharing. So with the 5 people, they are starting to understand where the other 5 people come from, what's happened to their lives in the past month, what they like, you legitimize bragging. You legitimize negative complaining. You legitimize the interesting one is always the most fascinating thing that comes out in each group. But legitimizing the negative, you get out the negatives in every group. And I'm going around listening to each group while this is going on.
Sure.
Okay? Just to see how it's going. And here again, give control to your people. Get them to share with each other their life, the positive, the negative, and the interesting. Get them to listen to each other. Get them to understand where everybody's coming from. And it's a great way to start a meeting because when it's finished, everybody feels good. It's a feel-good activity. But again, give control without giving it up. And that's another technique that I use. I've got a half dozen more that we don't have time for here. But the 5 basic needs, if they are met, people will be motivated. And if you have any therapists listening out there or moms and dads listening with a problem child, you ask them, I would use the 5 basic needs. And I would go to my kids and I would say, hey guys, I get the idea that you're not happy with the way things are going here. Let's look at your 5 basic needs. When it comes to stress and anxiety and fear, where are you? Are you a 1, a 2, a 3, 5, or a 10? 10 being you feel completely safe. How do you feel about your safety here? Normally, that's not a big one in a family situation, but the second one is happiness. You, again, get them to rate their feeling of happiness on a scale of 1 to 10. And then you do that on control on a scale of 1 to 10. Then you do that on caring on a scale of 1 to 10. And then you do it on purpose on a scale of 1 to 10. And based on the feedback you get from your client or your kids, you identify the need that most needs to be worked on.
So if what I'm looking at safety, happiness, control, caring, and purpose.
Right.
Okay.
Once you identify the need that is most in need, you can focus on what can be done. You can say, well, what can be done? What can I do to help you get that need met? And you get a dialogue going with your kid or with your client. If you're a psychotherapist or what have you, a teacher in a classroom with the kid who is just totally out of control. You identify the 5 basic needs and where they are on that, and you can start with a plan to try to fix that. Now, there are 9 forms of power. How much time do we have?
About 6 minutes.
6 minutes. Okay. I think I can cover that.
Okay.
Five of the forms of power are freeing forms of power, where you give control to people without giving it up. And now remember, as a leader, the most important thing you do as a leader or as a parent, you give control to your kids, but you don't give it up. You give control to the people working for you, but you don't give it up. Because once you give up control, you're done. They will begin abusing you and using you, because you can walk into Walmart and look at the parents who are giving control to their kids.
Oh,
and
God, yeah.
It's not a pleasant sight. Okay. So the 5 forms of power where you give control without giving it up are information, which is what we're doing right now.
Got it.
It's an inexhaustible form of power. It's unlimited. You can just keep on. Now, I get into the misuse of the 9 forms of power as well. Too much information is the misuse. You have to know how much information people can absorb. The second one is expertise. You can demonstrate how to do something, and the kid or the employee says, "Oh yeah, I see how you did that. I can do that." And they are free to imitate what you did, to follow the demonstration that you did on how to do something, okay?
Mm-hmm.
The third form of power is called referent. Now, French and Raven are the two who came up with the typology of power way back when. They had 5 forms of power. Referent, they call it referent, I call it personality. When I do this with teachers, and I say, which form of power do you use the most? And they always say personality. They said, if the kids like me, I've got it made. So, because if the kids like you, if you've got personality power, all you got to do is ask. You say, hey guys, can you do this for me? And they say, sure, teach, we'll do that. Again, free. Yeah, you use personality power a lot. Now, here's a form of power that's not been mentioned in the literature anywhere. It's called ego power. You stroke somebody's ego. You say, hey, last year when you did this, you did a beautiful job on this, and I've got to do that again this year. How about giving me a hand?
Got
You
it.
stroke their ego, and they say, sure, I'll help you. And there's the negative ego stroke that is the most powerful form of power. Now, you got to know how to use this. And I describe this in the book, how to do this, because if you use the negative ego stroke with someone who doesn't have a strong ego, it won't work. If you recall Muhammad Ali, Cassius Clay, in the 4th grade, his teacher said to him, you'll never amount to anything. Well, guess what he did when he won the gold glove in Cuba? He went back to that teacher. Very next day, he got back in town. And he says, remember when you told me I wouldn't amount to anything? Hey, teach, look at here. Here's the golden glove. A lot of coaches use it. They might say something like, hey, guys, this game we got coming up Friday, that team across town, they're pretty tough. I'm not sure you guys can get up for it. What do you think? Hey, coach, of course we're going to get up for it. And he gave them a negative ego stroke, and they puff up their chests, and they say, hey, we're going to be ready for them. We're going to beat them.
See, the way I view that approach is manipulative. I think everything is manipulation on the macro view, but this one does not work for me, because it was like, I don't know if I've ever used that approach with my children or with other people in my work, but I don't like it. I just whined. Whined on global.
The reason you don't like it is because you perceive it as manipulation.
Yes.
And manipulation is always a bad word when it comes to leadership. If you are perceived as manipulating the employees, they aren't going to like you at all. So you have to be careful with this technique, but it
Right.
is a very powerful form of power. Now,
Okay.
the fifth form of freeing power is called moral power. What
Oh,
is the right thing to do? In most families, parents have not established a set of rules that all the kids understand. There is a set of rules, but it's not written down. And everybody has to sort of guess what the rules are. But
mm,
uh, if I were a parent today and I've got 5 kids, if I were to do this all over again, I would give all 5 of my kids 3 3x5 cards and say, what rules do you think we ought to have in this house? And I would find out from them what they think the rules ought to be, just like I did as a teacher in the classroom.
right.
And once the rules are established, I would post them so everybody knows what they are. And when a
Yeah.
rule is violated, you just remind them, hey, remember this rule? You're not doing it. And they say, oh, yeah, you're right. And normally they will comply. They will do it. Moral power is a free form of power. And most organizations, they have rules like you must check in at the appointed time. If you're late, you'll get docked. But then there are a lot of other rules that are unwritten, and the employees don't know about them until they violate them, and then they get hammered. So I like to think that if you're a leader, moral power, you want that in place. So you want everybody to know what the rules are and let
That,
them establish those rules and add yours when they don't put in there the rules you think you have to have a successful organization or a successful family. Then you get the controlling forms of power: position, reward, and coercion. You know what those are, right?
yes.
Okay. When you are hired as a teacher, you get position power. With position power, you get reward and coercion power. As a parent, mom and dad, you have position power over the kids, an ability to give rewards and punish, right?
Right.
Okay. There's a fourth form of power that's critical, and it's called connection power. Connection power. Let's suppose you are the mom and you got 3 kids or 2 kids, and one of the kids misbehaves. And you go to the kid and you say, hey, I really don't appreciate what you just did. And when your dad comes home, I'm going to tell him what you did, and I'm going to let him take care of this. So dad comes home, you go to dad, and he says, you know what so-and-so did today? And dad says, no, tell me. And you tell him. And he says, oh, oh my gosh, I did that when I was a kid. I don't see that's a big deal. Let's just let that slide. What happens to mom's position power?
In about 5 years, she gets a divorce.
Connection power, when a teacher sends a kid to the principal for discipline, if the principal does not do anything, the teacher's connection power is limited. So if you think of President Trump, his connection power with the people is pretty strong. And he does his Twitter thing to keep it strong. His connection power with Congress is fairly decent. If you think of President Obama, his connection power with Congress was no good. He had lost it. He still had connection power with the people. And he used the executive order to get things done. Trump, on the other hand, is throwing it back to Congress and saying, guys, this DACA thing has to be fixed. I expect you to come up with a plan. Throws it back, gives control to Congress, and he wants them to fix it. So he is trying to make sure that he continues connection power with Congress. So connection power is a critical form of controlling power. With connection power, your position power is enhanced, and your ability to give rewards and punish are also enhanced. Those are the 9 forms of power. Now, I haven't told you anything you didn't know, right?
No.
So
Except,
basically,
yeah.
I'm a common sense person. who tries to put things into some kind of scheme so that when you as the leader are doing something and it doesn't work, you can reflect back on which forms of power you used. Now, normally I advise using information power first, because if you're the leader, you give control to people, but you don't give it up. So I take control back and I step in and I say, hey guys, wait a minute. I'm the boss here. I'm sorry. There's in chapter 2, we get the 3 ways to handle a conflict. How much time do we have?
Well, right now, I think I want to wrap this up, and I think
Okay.
we'll be fine. What I'm going to find out is once I listen to this, is see if there's more information I want, and I may invite you back for another show to cover maybe the breakdowns of the controlling power and the different forms of power and the controlling forms of power, because I think that this is important for everyone, not just students. I think that not all of them are even.
Yeah, leadership requires that you must use the 9 forms of power, and a lot of people have not thought about what they are. They
So
just
when
have.
people,
Go ahead.
if I have listeners who want to get a free chapter from either of your books, what chapter should they ask for?
That's chapter 4 in book 1.
Okay, because I think that this is the most vital in book 1, which is School Climate and Culture Vis-a-vis Student Learning Keys to Collaborative Problem Solving and Responsibility. Chapter 4 in book 1, because that's what I'm going to put out in the show notes, is that's what people should ask for. And they could get this by emailing you at cbulach@comcast.net.
Correct.
Okay, and then they can put that information in the subject line and you will know what it's all about.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, let me ask you, what has been a lesson that has stuck with you throughout your life, adult life, whatever?
What has been what?
A lesson or advice that has stuck with you.
Oh, I grew up a farm boy in Indiana, and my dad always said, if it's not broke, don't fix it. I have seen so many principals on a new hire come into a school that is working just fine, and they take it over, and they've got to show the faculty and students that they're the boss.
Right.
And they totally destroy the climate and culture. So, my advice to a principal or a teacher, when you come into a classroom or into a school, do the expectations diagnosis. What do you guys expect of me as your principal? What do you expect of me as your teacher? Find out what the expectations are, and don't tell them right off the bat. Most leaders go in there and they tell the teachers what they expect. Most teachers go into a classroom and tell the students what they expect. And they just turn everybody off. It's a power thing. Position power. They want to assert their position power. And it's the worst thing you can do in a new situation, to assert your position power. Your role as a leader is to let other people's stars shine, not your own. That doesn't mean you don't do your own. But your role in life is a servant leader. You are there to serve their needs. And that's hard for people to understand, because self-serving is rampant throughout our society.
No kidding.
Okay.
Yeah, this is really important, because even in management levels change from the, certainly below the president of any company. You have your AVPs, you have managers, you have supervisors, you have whatever labels and titles they choose to put on, and they come in and they just start banging their hammer on the desk, and they go, this is my way, and this is the way we're going to be doing it, regardless of who you are, what you do, and what you feel about it. And you can't deal with people like that.
No.
Okay, this has been a great show. I've learned a lot in a format that I can reframe and use for my own needs, for my own prospects, to turn them into clients. Share this podcast with others. That is the most important thing. This information is vital. It's important to you, whether you are a parent, child, teacher, student, boss, employee, leader of any style. This is some information that is not necessarily new, but Clete has presented it in forms that will enable you to reframe for your own use, to help you be successful in your own life and help the others that are beneath you, whether they're students or employees or your own children, be more successful. And I would ask that any of you else that are listening, you can go to my website at askjoannevictoria.com and get a free copy of one of my books called The True Self Handbook, a guide to transform your life. And I appreciate Dr. Bulach being here today. And thank you very much, Clete. And I hope to talk to you soon.
Well, I enjoyed interacting with you, Joanne.
This was great. I really enjoyed it. I enjoyed you and I enjoyed the content. And I will talk to you soon. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Sanity Project podcast. Please go to askjoannevictoria.com and continue the conversation on her podcast page. And get a free copy of her book, The True Self Handbook, a guide to transform your life. That's askjoannevictoria.com. Take care, and thanks for being here.